Hello, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam, and I'm hoping that everybody had a fantastic start of 2022. I know I did. I spent 3 weeks in Guatemala with family, and now I'm back in the Netherlands. This is the first video of the year for this channel. I did make a couple of videos in Guatemala, but they were just not on the level. And so I'm back home now, and I got my whiteboard and stuff, and I wanted to have a go at a topic that has always been interesting to me, but which until now I had a hard time wrapping my head around, as I believe many people do. The video is going to be a little bit abstract, and it is not going to be very practical. Right? This is not about how to reduce anxiety or, function better in the world. It is much more oriented to the general objective of the spiritual path and what it results in if followed, if followed correctly and with consistency and enthusiasm. And that is the topic of enlightenment. I think this topic has been notoriously poorly explained by people in the past. As I've changed the kind of books I read away from, sort of the power of now and these kind of new spiritual classics towards the more Vedantic literature and also talks captured from sages like Nisargadatta Maharaj, Ramana Maharshi. They give a ton of examples and they explain this in every which way, and you still need to tease out what the hell it is that they're really trying to say, because it's very obscure. But I kind of think I got it, so I'm gonna give this a go. If you're not into sort of high spirituality or abstract stuff, switch this off. It's gonna bore the hell out of you. But if you want to know the answer to the truth of life, you might stay tuned. So here it is. Here's my go at this. So you can think of the starting point in anybody's spiritual journey as one that looks more or less like this little diagram over here. In fact, I wanted to rephrase something as I saw myself starting this video. I call this world, but we're going to call it other. So the starting point in all these journeys is one of a fragmented view of self and the world. And it's fragmented across several different lines, as a matter of fact. And one line of fragmentation is kind of internal, and you can see that as mind versus body, with mind here represented by thinking, ABC, and memory, which is this little postcard drawing here, and body represented by emotions, which is represented by this heart, and the body itself represented by the image of the physical body. So there is a rift between these two. And that translates implicitly into a rift also between what we call me and the other, or me and the world. When you're having a good time, it's me and the other, and when you're having a shitty time, it's typically called me versus the other. There's this clear divide in how things are experienced by you. So you have this sense of going around, being kind of a ghost in the machine that goes around inside your head and uses the body as a vehicle to move about in a world that is foreign to you, in a world that is outside you. So you, a mind and a body and a little homunculus inside the mind, are navigating a world that is external and that is foreign to you. and that presents you with a series of challenges, pleasures, and dangers, and which need to be curtailed, right? They need to be negotiated with, navigated, worked around, worked towards, and so on. So this is the starting point. So it's a starting point of division, fragmentation all over the place, and this creates fear. The main thing that this creates is fear in the system, because a system made up of a mind and body inside such a foreign world needs to be constantly on the defensive. It needs to arm itself up by making its body a strong fortress as strong as possible, and by making its mind as shrewd as possible. So it needs to be cunning and tactical and smart and schemy in order to preserve the integrity of this vulnerable entity that you feel yourself to be, against this chaotic and surprising world, right? Now that fear that this sense of separation engenders is all pervasive. Sometimes it is felt overtly, but for a lot of people it is this underlying hum of anxiety that never really goes away. So you are never really totally carefree and feeling full and free. Now we try to dampen this anxiety by chasing for pleasure, which we call happiness, but it's really just pleasure, and that sort of keeps it at bay. And we try to provide ourselves with pleasurable experiences as often as possible to keep that the anxiety of separation at bay. But all these desires really come from the fuel for desire is fear. So fear and desire are two sides of the same coin. And what is important to understand is that so long as this separation between me and other exists, or me versus the world, or me versus other exists, that will keep the fear in place. It is a fundamental fear or an existential anxiety of just, being is a scary thing, right? Existing is a scary thing, rather. In the yogic view of things, or in the Buddhist view of things, so long as this division is created, you are a sick individual, or rather, you are not healed, because healing comes from wholeness, and there is no wholeness in this picture. There is me versus the world or versus the other, and even within myself, there is my mind versus my body, or my brain versus my heart. There's all these divisions going on. So this is a fragmented picture of the self that creates fear and unhappiness. Now, as we look at this picture, we can understand that there's a number of elements that create this fragmented picture, and there's elements that keep it in place. So the picture arises from the thinking mind. So it is the thinking mind that has the tendency to create divisions in everything it sees, because the thinking mind is dual in itself. So the first big division that it creates is that of subject and object. But it also creates divisions between feelings and emotions. It creates divisions between me and the other. It creates divisions in time of past, present, and future, or rather past and future. So it tends to divide all kinds of things, and it uses memory to keep that division in place. So the division creates itself all the time through memory. Memory is not just mental memory, there's also bodily memory, right? So all these habits keep these divisions in place. And so what the yogis figured out, or what the Buddhists figured out, was that in order to get rid of this division, we needed to understand how to integrate things. There's another element to this, which is that in this division, our sense of self is kind of external. So we live in this periphery all the time, right? There's a lack of center to us. There is just content being lived. My body, my thoughts, my emotions, my memories, and the things that I see out there, or hear out there, or taste out there, right? So we live out there. There is this peripheral type of existence. So they started to realize that part of what keeps this in place, apart from memory, is the fact that our existence is lived in this periphery, and our attention keeps jumping across all these things all the time. So we wake up in the morning, we remember our name, we realize that we are in a bed, that has to do with a sense of seeing and touching maybe the body. And that reminds us, we go to memory, that we have a job, and therefore we think, oh, I have to get out of bed right now. And then we feel a sense of dread because it's so early and I don't like this. And then we go back to the sense of sight by looking at our alarm clock and realizing that we can snooze a little bit longer. So we think, I should push the snooze button. We go to our body to do that, and we feel relief for the fact that we can sleep another 10 minutes. And this thing goes on all the time, so that our attention is jumping across this periphery all the time. And in order to, so the jumpiness of attention was one of the things that they noticed. And the other thing that they noticed was this fact that all of these elements, the body's craving for comfort, emotional needs and wants, thoughts, memories, sights, sounds, and tastes of the outside world, they all have a kind of stickiness of their own. So that an untrained mind could be described as a mind that is jumpy and sticky. So that it is stuck to this periphery, and it keeps getting pulled by the memory of this, which gives me the feeling of that, which prompts me to look at a certain thing, and each of these kind of keep pulling the mind to the periphery to keep it there. And the jumpiness and the stickiness is this characteristic of the untrained spiritual mind. So the journey begins then by starting to train the mind, and they figured that if you could get your mind to sit on one of these things for extended periods of time, as opposed to jumping from one to the other, that the jumpiness could be dealt with. Perhaps not the stickiness at first, but the jumpiness could be dealt with as a thing. So they said, well, here in the body, there's a sensation that we call the breath, right? I'm going to signify that by a red dot here, and that is pointing to the nose of the individual, or maybe the nose. And they said, well, how about instead of jumping all over the place, we make this thing sit on one element for an extended period of time, and that would get rid of the jumpiness of the mind. And so you do that, you start to do that, and that's what most people call meditation, even though it's not. It's just concentration practice, also known as anapana meditation. And lo and behold, as time goes by, that starts to get rid of the jumpiness of the mind. Now, it's a very difficult exercise because your memories and your thoughts and your emotions keep pulling you all over the place. So they keep trying to drag you. And also some sights and sounds and noises around you also keep trying to pull you away from this dot of concentration on which you are trying to sit. But as time goes by, you start to get better at this. And you are able then to remain more focused on whatever element of this whole periphery of experience you are trying to focus on. So your focus gets better, and that's very good. Now, once you have a better focus, you start to try and do something very interesting, which is you start to apply that focus to each of those areas of your experience in order to see them more clearly for what they are. So I'm going to describe each of them and why they are sticky and how we unstick from them by seeing them correctly. So if you look at our thoughts, this thinker here, this element of experience called the thinking, tends to be where we in modern society park our main sense of self. So this me-ness that we're talking about, this me, typically sits in our thinking for the most part. Our body is usually very neglected in modern society, but so we start with the thinker, and by parking our attention and looking at the thoughts, you get to observe them clearly and therefore separate your sense of self from the activity of thinking. Typically, those two are bundled or mushed together so that you say, I think. You rarely say, this thought has arisen in me, which is which would be the correct language, but it sounds a little bit strange to say it that way. But you want to get to the point where that intuitiveness grows in you. So you observe thought so much that you separate yourself from it. That's interesting, right? And that same dynamic happens with all of these. In other words, your disidentification from or the disentangling or unstickiness from all these elements here is achieved not by shying away from them, but by putting our attention on them so intensively that we permeate them completely with our attention and therefore realize our sense of self as separate from them. So as we start to do that, so we do that with thinking by observing it as closely as possible. Same goes for memory, which is kind of a visual form of thought. Yeah. We do that with our emotions as well. We allow ourselves to feel our emotions fully. This is a very unpleasant part of the process, by the way, because we are typically trying to think our way out of things so that we don't have to feel. So we start to really feel. We also start to practice breath work and body work like Tai Chi or yoga to start permeating our body with our attention. And what we do with the senses is we try to not get hypnotized by our by the senses. So whereas what we call the me needs to be penetrated fully with attention, what we call the other needs to be avoided for a while. It needs to be avoided for a while so that this division here is erased. So we integrate from the inside out. To integrate from the inside out, we don't pay attention to the other for a while. The other is left alone, right? Our attention is focused on the inside, mind, emotion, body, and we permeate it all with our attention, and we start to integrate it all. What's funny is that as we start to integrate our internals, so our mind and our body and our emotions, the barrier between self and other starts to become more porous. So whereas this used to be the solid line, you see that it now becomes a kind of dashed line. Even though we're not doing anything with our external perceptions, it's almost as if our personality starts to become more transparent, right? Less egoic, therefore less fearful and less needy. And so we continue this process, entering our emotions, our body, our thoughts with full awareness and with full surrender, which is a theme of this channel, and that creates a certain integration of the me. Now, something interesting happens as we do this, which is that as the me or as the elements of what we call me start to be fully understood and integrated, a certain something starts to arise, which is the hint of something in the middle of ourselves, which I'm going to represent by the all-seeing eye of awareness, right? And you start to kind of realize that apart from all this periphery of thinking and body and emotions that you thought you were, there's a center to you. There's a certain observing center that is in the middle of yourself, yeah? Which is the one that guides its focus towards any of these bits of content here in the periphery. And you start to make a move towards that center. And you start to come from that center more and more, as opposed to confusing yourself with the content of your thoughts, or confusing yourself with your emotions or the sensations in your body, or even the physical body itself. So you start to gather towards that center. And that feels very pleasant. The more centered you are, the less fearful you are, and you start to interact with the other in a much more coherent way. But alas, that is not the end of the journey, because after you have made the identification with all this periphery a lot more transparent, what starts to happen is that you start to recognize that there's nothing in the center, actually. You try to find it, but you can't, because it isn't really there. And you come to realize, yeah, and this is the part where enlightenment starts to rear its beautiful face. You start to realize that what you are is the entire process happening in the periphery. So you are this, and that process is no different from things that you called me or things that you called other, but it is a single process. So because it is a process of perception, and perception of your thoughts and perception of this whiteboard are on equal footing. They're on the same level. So you disidentify yourself from your mind and your body, and the me that you used to be gets replaced with the I, or the self. And the self is the ongoing entire thing, both world and mind and body, all of it, right? And you can think of the self, I'm gonna make that, can we see it here? Yes. You can think of the self as what you are, as this very transparent, very thin edge here, in which reality is simultaneously created and perceived in real time on an ongoing basis. Yeah. This is you right here. This process, this ongoing process right here in this infinitely thin light of perception that is it is lucid. It's pure lucidity taking different shapes all the time that appear sometimes as my mind and sometimes appear as the world, but it is all the self. And so that's my current understanding of enlightenment, is when you intuitively feel like the entire world and your entire mind and body is the self, it's you. And that's where the funny saying of Buddhism comes in, of make me one with everything. They are not talking about make my mind and body melt into the world. That's impossible. It's rather make me realize that I was never my mind and body, but that those two are simply elements of the broader self, which encompasses the whole thing. When that happens, certain teachings of even Christianity start to make sense. If you'll remember, Jesus at some point said, love your enemy as yourself. What he what that actually means is not that you have to love your enemy as you love your mind and body, but it means recognize your enemy as nothing other than your very self. It's only the self. There is only ever the self. It is the same self for you as it is for another mind and body. It's one self. And the reason it is one self is because it has no characteristics. This thin edge here that we describe is the ultimate subject. All these are objects. You can point at them, you can give them a name, you can give them a space and time. Whereas the self is spaceless and timeless. It has no characteristics. Therefore, it's infinite. Therefore, it's perfect. Therefore, it's the same for everybody. Yeah? I thought I warned everybody this was going to get abstract. This is as abstract as it gets. We're talking about something that you can't describe essentially, but you can give pointers to it. And the process of enlightenment, therefore, is one in which you abstract yourself away from content towards an imaginary center, and then you come to realize that there is no real center to the I or the self, but that it is made of the entire thing. And once you do that, of course, there are definitive changes that start to happen in your physiology, and there are changes that start to happen in your emotions and your thoughts and in the way you relate to the world. Emotions are a very important element in all this because they are the part in which mind and body meet, and therefore we think of emotions as something that should feel good and shouldn't feel bad, but emotions or the heart, as in the proverbial heart, is a thermometer to indicate how integrated versus how fragmented you are within yourself. So fragmentation within yourself is felt as painful, and integration within yourself is felt as joy or love. And love is the absence of division when you are whole. But you can't be whole when you see mind and body and heart as others, or when they see themselves as fraction. And you certainly cannot feel whole, or you cannot feel love, so long as you see others as others. You can only love something when you see it, when you recognize it as the self. Everything else is just a dualistic emotion, which is sometimes nice and sometimes not so nice. But true love is the absence of division, or the absence of fragmentation within and without. So I hope that makes sense. That is my current understanding of the process. And there are different practices, as I described. The austerities, for example, apply to the world. So you withdraw from the world temporarily, right? So you avoid sights, sounds, and pleasures and whatever, so that you can do the internal integration work at first. And then by doing that, you find yourself completely merged with the world as a single thing later down the line. When it comes to thinking, this is typical meditation work over here. When it comes to emotions, this is typical shadow work or acceptance and feeling of emotions, allowing yourself to feel. And when it comes to the body, this is typical embodiment work, such as Tai Chi, breath work, and yoga. So anything that will help your mind permeate the body fully, permeate your emotions fully, permeate your thoughts and memories fully. And once permeated, they are recognized as nothing other than the self. And when that happens, the world also gets recognized as the self, and it becomes a single thing. This is the I am, right? As opposed to the me versus the other. I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys have a great start of the year. Maybe this kind of information is a little bit abstract, but for those who are interested in pursuing a kind of long-term spiritual practice, or not simply getting away from stress, but really finding meaning and trying to understand what this whole game seems to be about. It's something along these lines, and I hope to keep coming up with more videos as the year goes by. Cheerio.